over 1,500 homes. He is going to give us the blueprint. And with that blueprint, I believe that all of you can do the same. There's a little spiciness curved in with the NAR, and I'm so happy that you guys are here to get prepared. I'm going to hand over the mic to our Aaron Novello.
So I'm 26 years old. I just got my real estate license. And the company that I chose to hang my license with had a mandatory training program, which, good for them, by the way, right? Most companies don't do that. And it was 3 weeks long. And part of this mandatory training was a week of training just on the listing presentation. And what they instructed me to do, they gave me, I'm dating myself, there were no iPads at the time, right? They gave me these printouts to go to Staples and Kinko's to make a flip chart. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Okay, you guys perhaps weren't in the business back then, but a flip chart to present the value proposition. And then they shared with me at the end of this week, the challenge was we were gonna have to present amongst all of our peers. Now you guys, some of you guys know me really well, some of you guys don't. I'm extremely competitive, okay? I'm so competitive that if you're on my team, sometimes you may not like it because I'm gonna push you, right? I hate losing more than I like winning. So I took this super seriously, okay? I was like reading and studying and chanting. I was role playing with Carla on a regular basis. Like, hey babe, you gotta sit down, I gotta run through this presentation. She's like, what are you doing? I'm like, trust me, right? And I even go out and I get a suit. Okay. Now I had no money at the time. I was going to school at the University of Florida. So I went to an estate sale and a guy who died happened to have my measurements. So I got the suit, and forever and ever me and Carla would joke, yo, that's from the Dead Man collection. It's like, who are you wearing? The Dead Man. Okay. And I showed up dressed fresh like $1 million, ready to rock. And I was baffled by what I saw. Because everybody else was wearing flip-flops and fucking jeans and pajamas, okay? And it was very clear to me that nobody took this as seriously as I did. They didn't prepare at all. They were stumbling and fumbling. And I thought to myself, I'm onto something here. I had a mentor tell me one time, it's very easy to be rich because there's very few people that are actually trying. Okay? So what I did is I recognized that the money is not in the service. The money's in the selling of the service. Okay? You guys say, like, what's your competitive advantage? You'd be like, I put my clients first. Just, you know, that's fucking stupid. Because everybody does that, team. Well, you know what, Natalie? I'm honest. Huh. Everybody does that. And I realized, look, let me prove my point. How many of us have a license to sell real estate? Show of hands. Okay, that all allows us to perform the same service, correct? Do we all make the same amount of money? No. Why? Some people know how to sell the service better than others. So if that's true, I realized I should spend all of my time learning how to sell the service. Do you understand? Not sit in meetings and figure out the fucking paperwork. Which has nothing to do with making money, by the way. Okay? So what I did when I realized this, I was like, okay, I need to spend all my time selling the service. I role play twice a day, 6 days a week for 3 years. I would record myself giving presentations and send it to my coach to critique. I would sit down on a listing presentation and be like, hey, just so you know, I've hired a professional to help me with my presentation skills. So would you mind if I recorded this conversation? You want to have a really good, entertaining evening? Record one of your presentations, sit down with your significant other and a bottle of wine and be like, this is going to be entertaining. Because you'll find yourself like, what the heck? Like, why did I say that? I just verbally vomited. What is that? It's embarrassing. You walk in there, you're like, oh my God, you have a puppy? I have a puppy. Yay, we should be best friends. Please pick me. Okay? And now I no longer worry about what to say on presentations, including with these changes. Okay, I no longer worry for our coaching clients, one-on-ones, 12 of which make over $1 million a year. I no longer worry for the 355 agents that we've partnered with in the last 25 months. Because I know when times get tough, only the skilled get paid. Period, end of story. The cool part about skill is that you can learn it. It implies, though, practice. Show of hands, how many people practice daily what to say and how to say it? Everybody else is independently wealthy, apparently. How interesting. Let me ask myself a question. Do I have C habits and I'm praying for an A+ life? Do I have C habits, but I'm praying please, for an A+ life? That's an unrealistic expectation. And I believe that everybody in this room with the right strategy, the right approach, the right skills, the right way of thinking, you could accomplish anything that I've done in less than half the time. I've spent the last 17 years of my career, I've sold 2,000 properties, 80% of that business is listings sold. I started a coaching company with 100 coaching clients, 12 of which make over $1 million a year. I own part of a Keller Williams office, I sold it back, made a transition to EXP, and in 25 months, recruited 355 agents to the organization. You can clap now. So what we're gonna do today is we're gonna spend, I don't know, maybe like 45 minutes to an hour, and I'm gonna run through with you a few things. Number one, what has changed with these rule changes, okay? Number two, how to present them on a listing side. Because you noticed that we were just having this conversation. I'm sorry, your name again? Matt. Me and Matt were just having this conversation where he's noticing that all of the focus seems to be on the buy side. Do you know why that is? The vast majority of agents are buy side heavy. 70% of their business is buy side deals. So the reason is there's lots of anxiousness and anxiety around it. Does that make sense? She's like, I'm really grateful that now we're going to be talking about, okay, how do I present this on the sell side? That when you're sitting down on a listing presentation, so he says, hey, I heard I don't have to offer any commission. Anybody heard that? Anybody going on listing appointments has heard it?
Not yet.
Right? Okay. And what I'm aware of is it'll be in the news cycle for a little bit. You'll hear it more and more and more. But yeah, like I need to be prepared for that. So that way you guys can get your unfair share of the business and continue to list property in high volume. Who's up for this? Say aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm in the right room. Who's up for this? Say aye.
Aye.
Good. So the listing presentation itself, what exactly has changed? Well, virtually nothing. 99% of it is still intact, okay? The only thing that's really changed is a little detour in the conversation that we're gonna have in terms of compensation. This I wanted to share with you so you could just get a real clear picture as to how valuable this skill is. According to the National Association of Realtors, boo, the average realtor will go on 100 listing presentations and only take 20 listings. Guys, that's pathetic. 100 listing presentations and take 20. Why is that? Why do you think that is? I know why. You guys just revealed it. Nobody's practicing. That's why. You know why? You think in your infinite wisdom you can wing it. Let me tell you something. You're not that cool. And you're not that cute. Okay? You guys think like, oh my God, my Instagram, this is going to do it for me. No, it's not. Because I'll come in and kick your ass with skills all day long. Okay? Let's do the math. If you only take 20 listings, 15 sell, you make 150 grand. People think this is a lot of money. I don't think it's a lot of money, but okay. Let's say you make 150 grand. I will go on 100 listing appointments and take 85. 80 listings, 70 sales, 700,000. Look at the difference in income. Massive. What's the difference between those two income numbers?
Skills.
Wow. Hallelujah. Amen. The tough part about skills is you have to do the hard work to acquire them. Because when I first started doing this, I promise you, I didn't come out of my mother speaking this way. It's countless, disgusting, nauseating amounts of practice. Okay? So if you want to get paid like a professional, you need to practice like one. If you did not raise your hand, that's letting me know you're not getting paid like a professional. Because you're not practicing like one. I don't care how many homes sold you put with your client. It's like you're one closing. Right? Okay. So there's three segments that hits home, huh? So there's three segments to the listing presentation. And again, guys, 99% of the conversation has not changed. The only part that's changed is we're taking a small detour. So the way I like to describe this to people, how many of you guys use like iMaps or Google Maps? Okay. When you do that and you put in a location, you're given two choices. One is a paid route, the Turnpike, and the other is a non-paid route, I-95. What's the difference between the two besides the money?
Time.
I'm sorry, louder?
Time.
Time. One's faster. The paid route is faster by 5 to 7 minutes maybe. The unpaid route takes 5 to 7 minutes longer. That's all we're doing here, okay? By me having a conversation, once we get to the compensation part, which we will get to, it's just a little detour for 5 to 7 minutes where I'm going to discuss with you the pros and cons of offering compensation, okay? Not get defensive. You know what I saw at the beginning of this when all these rule changes are starting to happen? All these agents posting shit trying to defend why they make so much money. That, my friends, is dumb. Can you imagine your doctor going on, well, you know, the reason why I make so much money is because blah, 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 blah. What would you think of that? You'd be like, I don't care. Right. By the way, you make too much, right? But that's what we were doing as an industry. And that's silly. So I shouldn't be getting defensive, trying to defend. How many people felt the need to defend truthfully? When people, if anybody asks you about commissions, you feel like, how dare you ask me? What? Don't you know who I am? Don't you know what I do? Don't you know only my mom watches my Instagram? Right, and my grandma. Two people who like my shit. I find it amazing our industry puts people on panels who have like 2,000 followers and they talk to you about media. That's comical. They don't make any money from it. It's dumb. So, 3 parts to the presentation, okay? And again, this is the part that is exactly the same. The first part is from the time I hit the door to the time I start to talk about price. And all this is orchestrated, by the way. The next segment is the portion where we talk about price. The last segment is handling objections and closing. This has not, guys, has this changed? No. Hasn't changed at all. Okay, the presentation itself has not changed. Okay. Now, what's super interesting about this is all orchestrated. Now, my daughter, she does like Broadway, you know, and she's had the good fortune of being selected to be the lead in like a bunch of different plays, and she was just Willy Wonka, right? And it's interesting, they give these 11-year-olds, my daughter's 11, they gave her 3 weeks to memorize 48 lines and put on this whole show, right? Do you know what they do for the first 3 days of practice? They just practice where they stand on the stage for 3 days before they even get to words. Then they role play through the words 3 times a day for 3 weeks. And then right before the presentation, it's 8-hour days. Can you imagine if you prepared for a listing presentation like that? Instead, do you know what you do? You go in there, you're like, ha, 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 oh my God, your kids go to school here, my kids go to school here, yay. That's why you don't list properties, guys, in high volume. The only people who list with you are people who know you, like you, love you. You feel the energy in the room? It's like, fuck. Okay? But having this scripted system, guys, I would go on 150 appointments a year. I did it the same way every single time. Let me ask you a question. Do you want your pilot winging it? Do you want your surgeon winging it? Do you want your surgeon to be like, you know what, Esteban, I know you really well. I don't need to look at the checklist. Fuck it, I'm just going to wing it today. How quickly would you get off the table? You'd be like, excuse me, take off all your shit, like I'm out. But yet, be honest. How many times do you do that on listing presentations? All the time. Guys, it's irresponsible and it is immature. And unprofessional. Okay? So the same way every single time, it follows this framework. So what does that sound like? We hit the door. As soon as we hit the door, guys, I had to remind myself at the beginning to smile. I would show up like this. I'm here to list your home. All fucking business, right? Smile. Hi, Aaron Novello, nice to meet you. Yeah, what I'd like to do is just to take a quick look around the home. Would that be okay? Did you want me to take my shoes off first? Why? It's your space. I want to be respectful of it. Okay, how many people, somebody said to you, no, don't worry about it, but you know the shoes lined up? Take your fucking shoes off. Okay? Because it's their space. I just want to be respectful of their space. And then while I'm starting to look through the home, right? Awesome. Well, I'm noticing here, David, that the home is really tastefully furnished. So when we have offers come in, are we going to be including contents, or do you want to take that with you to your next destination? When who has offers come in? How interesting. I'm assumptively closing, like we are already doing this. Do you see? Have we talked about price? Have we talked about commission? Have we talked about your bullshit buyers from Venezuela? And your fantastic marketing, which, by the way, we all use the same photographers. Yeah, it's true. Okay. So, and then they're like, no, like we're going to take the furniture with us. Okay, good. Now we continue to walk through. And if I remember correctly, Amy, based on our conversation you mentioned in preparation for connecting, you don't plan on making any modifications or changes before I start to bring buyers through. Is that correct? Before who starts to bring buyers through? You see? We are moving in the direction of what we're doing. I'm assumptively closing. How many times do you have to ask somebody to do something before they typically say yes? 7 to 8. You know what most of you guys do? You try to get them to like you first, and then when you get to the end, you ask them once. And then you go back and you're like, oh my God, I think I really got this one. We connected. Oh my God, we had cafecitos together. They're going to list with me. And then they call you and you're like, hey, we really appreciate your time. We listed with somebody else. You know why? Because they followed a process. They closed. Do you see? But if I start closing at the end, I have a problem because now I got to get through 7 or 8 and it's going to get weird. I'd rather be doing this during the process, right? So they say, no, we're not planning on making any changes or modifications. Okay, great. Great, so I guess we could sit down here. We could sit down in the kitchen. I want to direct that conversation. Do you know why? Otherwise, I'll end up on the couch like this with a little doggy on my lap, and you're like, what the hell's happening here? How did I get here? Anybody besides me ever had that happen? Yeah. Do you know why that happened? Yeah, she's like, shit, that happens to me all the time. Do you know why that happened? Because you're letting them direct it. You're being too nice. Somebody needs to lead, guys. You know who should lead? The one who knows what they're doing. Can you imagine that you in a doctor's office are like, yeah, just do whatever you want while you're here. Right? So yeah, we could sit down here. What's also true is I want to position myself, if we're having a conversation and there's 2 individuals here, I want to position myself this way so I can direct and I'm the center of attention. You ever sat across from somebody and it feels weird? The reason is because there's a physical barrier between the 2 of you. It becomes adversarial. It's me versus you. I want to present and be the center of attention. Make sense? So once we get to that place, first and foremost, I just want to begin our time together just by saying thank you. And mean it. Smile. For taking the time to meet with me and potentially helping you with the sale. I always like to begin these conversations just by asking a few quick questions. Would that be okay? Yes. First of all, does it demonstrate that I know what I'm doing? Yes. Am I following a process? Yes. Does that make you feel safe? Yes. 100%. You ever been around somebody who's disorganized? How do you feel? Yes. Yeah. Well, agents are like, oh my God, I got like my hippo I have to go fucking feed. And you're like, what? That's why I was like 30 minutes late. Like, I can't believe it. Just a shit show. You're not giving people certainty. That's why they're not hiring you. Do you understand? So I just have a couple quick questions to ask just to make sure that I'm fully prepared and do a great job. Would that be all right? Yep. So the first question I have, which I'm pretty sure I know the answer to in preparation for connecting, is that you've already decided that you would like to sell the property. Is that correct? You're not interested in doing something else with it, like holding on to it, renting it out, or something like that. I should know this because I asked it in pre-qual. If you don't know this before you're going on the appointment, you're doing it wrong. If you're finding that shit out while you're sitting in front of them, you're doing it wrong and wasting tremendous amounts of time. The reason why you guys don't ask these questions is because you're afraid of the answers. Because you're afraid of them saying, you know what, I really don't have to sell. And then you're like, I don't have an appointment. I got to go prospect more. Right? So I should know this. So you definitely decided that you're going to sell the property. Is that correct? You're not interested in doing something else with it? And Camila says, yes. Good. So that leads me to my second question, which I'm also pretty sure I know the answer to, is you guys want to position the property price-wise to sell. You're not interested in having it sit on the market for like 6 or 7 months just testing the market. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right? And they're like, yeah, that's right. Okay, good. Make that check. I should know this, by the way. Because in pre-qual, I need to be asking, is it an option for you to not sell the home? Is it an option for you to rent the home and still move? I've only spoken to you. You seem to be excited about selling. How does your significant other feel about it? I need to know this shit before I go see them. If you don't know these, then you're going to be spending lots of times on appointments that actually aren't fruitful. And then you start to think something's wrong with me, but nothing's wrong with me. I'm just not asking good questions. Does that make sense? Which leads, and nothing can be more discouraging than going on unqualified appointments. Because you get all excited and you're in the car, you're like, I'm a great salesperson, today's the day. And then you sit down and they're like this. And you're like, oh, they're not doing nothing. Okay? And then that leads me to my third question, which I'm also pretty sure I know the answer to. I'm aware I sent you over some information in preparation for connecting. I'm sure you did some due diligence. You checked me out online. You saw track record and reviews. So Natalie, have you already decided, notice what I'm doing, because we're asking for something. Have you already decided that you would like for me and my team to help you with the sale? You're like, wow, oh my God, you asked them so soon? Yeah, you know why? I want to get out of the way. Because by the way, how many times have I closed already? 3 or 4. Have we talked about commission? No. Have we talked about price? No. Have you talked about your imaginary buyers in Venezuela? Nope. Do you see? Now, what are they going to say potentially to that question? What are the options?
Yes or no? We're not sure. We're interviewing someone else.
Good. So look, there's only 3. Yes, which inside you do the happy dance. No, or maybe. If they say anything other than yes, yeah, I get it. This is a big decision. You want to make sure you're making the best decision possible. I want to be clear that that is my intention. So provided that what I say makes sense and you feel comfortable and confident with me that I can help, I brought all of the appropriate paperwork with me, and I'm prepared to go to work for you today. Fair enough? What am I doing?
You're closing.
Yeah, and what are they trying to do? Ho, ho, ho. And I'm like, no, no, no. You're not getting off the hook that easy, team. We're not here to talk about tea and crumpets. We're here to do business. What I'm also doing is taking back status because they want to make the status lower. You see? That's what I'm here for. And by the way, that's 4 or 5 closes already. Now I'm going to continue. Along those lines, you were kind enough to share with me that the main reason that you wanted to sell this property was this, this, and this. And you were looking for an agent that had a great track record, great reviews, that could connect you with, some vendors. Is there anything else you'd be looking for from me today that will cause you to feel comfortable and confident just to go ahead and hire me and put me to work? That's another.
Closing.
How interesting. And what are they going to say there? I want to talk to you about? That dirty little word that nobody wants to talk about. But I want them to talk about it because if we don't talk about it, guess what's going to happen? They're not going to hire me. And then they're going to be like, oh, I talked to this other agent. He said this about the commission. You're like, bro, I would have done that. Like, you didn't know because you didn't ask. You see? So, anyway, I want to talk to you about the commission. Great. And what I'm aware of is that certainly is not going to be a reason why we don't do business, David. I'm sure we'll come up with something that's mutually beneficial to all parties. I want you to feel comfortable with the decision that you end up making. But I could promise you this, again, I know we'll be able to work that out. So provided that that's the case, it seems like we'll be able to proceed and move forward. Is that correct? And they're like, yeah. Okay, great. So the good news is we really only have to focus on a couple things today during our time together. The first is your motivation to sell, which is clear. You've already decided you're going to do that. The second issue is the price. Notice, am I talking about marketing? Why not?
Everybody.
Thank you. It's bullshit. That's why. Right? You know it. I know it. Your pictures are my pictures. Your Matterport video is my Matterport video. Your ads you run on Facebook is my ads I run on Facebook, right? That's why we're not talking about it. So, and notice we're still at the first part of the presentation, right? We haven't started to talk about price yet. We're getting there, okay? So I prepared for you this competitive market analysis, what's called a CMA, the purpose of which is really an attempt to make a very educated guess with regards to value, and it's comprised of 2 types of research. The first type is what is active on the market right now and not selling, which is great because your neighbors have done us a huge favor, Jesus. Do you know what it is? At prices that aren't working. That's very helpful to us. We can learn from that data. The second piece of data we'll look at is what has actually sold and closed most recently, because what something's worth is what somebody's willing to pay. How interesting. Now, when you do it like this, do you know what the seller's going to say? Exactly what you guys just did. Now, I'm curious, if I get you to tell me, is that more powerful than if I tell you? Why? Because you never argue with your own information. You will argue with mine. Correct? Yeah, well, somebody's willing to pay for it. So we'll look at this information together as a team, and what we'll see come to the surface, guys, is not a pinpoint to the penny in terms of price, but instead a tight, realistic range as to what's going to be reasonable. And then from there, it'll come down to strategy, because how we position the property price-wise is a strategy and attempt to get the most. And we'll go over those strategies because I want you to feel comfortable with the one we end up choosing. And whatever you decide, I'll support you 100%. Fair enough? How do most of you guys present price? I believe I can get, correct? You take ownership of it, and then when you go to ask for a price reduction, what do they say? You told me. Yeah, you know who did that? You did. This is what we were talking about before, right? You're trying to go in and lead with authority. Don't you know who I am? I got a 75 on a test. I have $1,000 and I'm not a felon yet. That was the criteria for me to become an agent. Most of the agents I know should not be giving any economic advice to anybody. Okay? You're there to help facilitate. And you're like, yeah, that makes sense. Good. So before we get into the analysis, I just wanted to review some of the questions I asked you over the phone just to ensure I could do a great job for you. Is that okay? Yeah. So you shared with me that the main reason that you're selling the property is you're looking to go to X. Is that correct? By the way, does this demonstrate that I'm listening to you? Yes. Do you know that they've done studies that waiters that write down your order get 27% higher tips than those who don't? Do you know why? It gives proof that somebody is what? Listening. Anybody besides me, when you order something at a restaurant, you're like, fuck, did they really remember that? Because they don't even write it down. Right? All the time, right? You're like, bro, I like a huge long order, and like, yeah.
I'm not here for pies and bits.
Yeah. Yeah, I want the right order. Like, this isn't a magician show. So, and then you also shared with me that time frame wise, you want to make this move happen in the next 120 days. Is that correct? And they're like, yeah. So, and then here's performative. So you're like, wow. So let me think about that, like 30, 60. What that would mean, David, is we would have to be under contract in the next 60 days because it usually takes 45 to 60 days to close. Have you thought about that? And they're like, wow, sort of. It's like, okay. So that's something to consider when we're thinking about price and strategy and how we position the property. And then in terms of showings, like, are you guys typically home or like who should be our point of contact? Notice in terms of showings, what am I assuming? That you're listening with me. Yeah, well, and that you're listening with me. And then in terms of point of contact, like we can set it up to where every time there's a showing, like you guys automatically get an email or a phone call. Would you like that? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, Camila, what's the best cell phone for you? I already have John's. The moment she gives me her cell phone, what is she doing mentally? Moving forward. Does that make sense? Every time they're continuing to give me information. So they're like, okay, great. So we'll review this analysis. We'll see that realistic range emerge, and then we'll discuss strategy. And then if it all makes sense, we can take care of the appropriate paperwork. Fair enough? Great. What have I accomplished in this section? How many times have I closed?
A million.
7 to 8. I've demonstrated that I've listened to you in the pre-qual. I brought up any objections, which is the commission. Do you see? I've gathered all the information I need in order to give a really good presentation. So now we get to the pricing portion of listing presentation. Now, why do you think this is a challenge for most agents?
You don't know your numbers?
I'm sorry?
You don't know your numbers?
Partially. What else?
You're afraid if you say the wrong thing, they're not going to pick you up.
You're afraid to tell the truth. Let me ask you a question. Can you really serve them if you don't tell them the truth?
No.
Do you want a doctor who's afraid to tell you the truth?
No.
She laughed. She's like, no. That would be what? Malpractice. Do you want an attorney who doesn't tell you the truth? An accountant who doesn't tell you the truth? So the reason why I'm afraid to tell the truth is because I'm being what? Selfish. I'm thinking about myself, not about them. Now, the key component there is telling. See, because if I get you to self-discover where we need to be at, I'm not telling you. So therefore, can I be held responsible for it when I call you and you need an adjustment? No. So here's what that language sounds like. So the competitive market analysis, as I mentioned, it's an attempt to determine value in the eyes of the buyer. Are you familiar, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, with the way buyers determine value? And then shut up. What are they going to say?
No.
No or? Yes. Whatever they say, you say the same thing. Great. Then you know that what they do is they're going to comparison shop. They're going to look at what's active on the market, not selling. They're going to look at what's sold and closed most recently. And from all of that information, they're going to make a determination as to where they feel comfortable making you an offer. Does that make sense to you? So as we review this information, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, it's really, really helpful to really put on our buyer's hat, because I'm aware that the buyer's hat is different than the seller's hat. Now, every time you say that, do you know what they're going to do? They're going to nod their head because they know that. Because when you're a buyer, what are you thinking? Everything's two? And when you're a seller, what are you thinking? My house is the shit. I have mallards in the backyard. I redid my toilet yesterday. I put doorknobs on my house. That's got to be worth $100,000. I literally had a guy one time tell me, I feed the mallards in my backyard. I'm like, an appraiser doesn't give a shit about the mallards, just so you know. Okay? So, can you imagine the appraiser like 1 mallard, 2 mallards, 3 mallards? It's just dumb, okay? Yeah, well, yeah, I get it. So here's how that sounds, right? So again, I'm aware that it's a little bit of a challenge. At the same time, it's super helpful as we look at this information to really do our best to look at it through the eyes of the buyer, because I'm aware that the buyer's hat is different than the seller's hat. And the question to be asking yourself, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, is based on what's active on the market and not selling, which we'll review, based on what has sold and closed most recently. The question to be thinking about is, if you were going to buy this home all over again in its current condition, where would you feel comfortable making an offer that you believe would be reflective of fair market value? Now, why am I using the word fair? In America, we have a massive concept of fairness, okay? If it's unfair, we freak the fuck out. Even when we know it's unfair, but when we find out it's really unfair. So how many people like kind of had an idea that rich people like got their kids into colleges? How many people knew that? When we found out to be true, people had to go to jail. Do you understand? Our concept of fairness is enormous. So when I say fair market value, what does your brain think? I have to be? You see, I'm commandeering your supercomputer. I'm getting it to focus and think on what I want it to focus and think on. When I put you in the frame of the buyer, does that allow you to filter information more clearly? Yes. It counteracts something called the endowment effect. Does anybody know what the endowment effect is in psychology? Here's a breakdown of it. Yeah, mine is better than yours. My stuff is stuff and your stuff is shit. That's the endowment effect. They've done studies at Harvard where if I touch a coffee cup for a minute, I will pay more money for something that I haven't touched because I start to imbue it with ownership, like it's mine. You ever, like people on eBay will be like, oh my God, I got outbid at the last second. They stole it from me. I'm like, bro, it wasn't yours. You understand? So it's intentional. There's a method to the madness. So then as we review the information, now it's like, okay, so first we're going to look at what's active on the market. So here's this property. It's 1265 Banana Street. It's in your neighborhood. Have you seen it? Why am I asking her that? Yeah, she's already been in the house or whatever, but also if she hasn't, I want her to tell me. No, I haven't seen it. It's like, okay, well, what I did is I brought with me on my iPad. How many of you guys are presenting with sheets of paper? Don't lie. Exactly. Look, she looked at him like, motherfucker, I know you are using a piece of paper. I watch you go on appointments. I swear, bro, she went like this. She was like, listen to me. If you are using sheets of paper, you're operating like it's 50 years ago. That is not the world that we live in anymore. Imagine you go in with sheets of paper and I go in with an iPad. Who looks more professional? Are you bringing an abacus to do the net sheet? Are you fucking going to the appointment on a horse? Are you sending a pigeon instead of a text message? Like, what are we doing? It's comical. Guys, we have technology. It's a real thing. We can use it.
How about if it's like little old people?
Yeah, I get that. And I always get that objection. What if they're little old people? You know what little old people do when I present them with an iPad? They grab the iPad from me and go like this. Because you know what they're used to seeing? Their grandkids on the iPad. Right? Now, to get them to sign paperwork, that's different. I understand that. And that might require, what I would suggest is you not going over there, paying somebody $50 with stickies, and they sign it. You see what I'm saying? So what we're going to do is, like, here's this property, right? And we can see here it's a 3-bedroom, correct? How many baths does it have? I want her to tell me, because if I tell her, she's going to argue with me. What's the square footage? And they'll be like, it's 1,500 square feet. Okay, so for all intents and purposes, in terms of a footprint, it's very similar to yours. Would you agree? Yes. Excellent. Well, let's take a look at the picture. See, if you're presenting with paper, you can't do this. Because, okay, how many of you guys have touched a physical picture and went like this to it? Do you know why? You've been trained that way. Technology has trained you. And if I'm presenting with pieces of paper, do you know what happens? You can't do what? This. I have a coaching client, Jose, and he fought me on this, like presenting, even though I'm older than him. He was like, nah, I'm not going to use an iPad. I want to stick to paper. I'm like, okay, grandpa. And then he finally went on an appointment, and here's what got him. You know what got him? He sat down with a lady. She's like, no, my kitchen's nicer than everybody's, blah, blah, blah. He's like, okay, let's take a look. He zoomed in. She's like, wait, let me get my glasses. Put her glasses on. She's like, oh, that kitchen's nicer than mine. He never presented with paper again. Do you see? You can't do that otherwise. So then I zoom in, and I'm like, yeah, would you say that that kitchen is like similar to yours, or perhaps it has some features and amenities, like some upgrades that, you know, yours doesn't? And then be quiet. Now she has to answer. Yeah, it's a little bit nicer, I guess. Meanwhile, it's like fucking much nicer. She's like, it's a little bit. I'm like, bro, you got like 1970 kitchen in there. Like, what are you talking about? It's like green. You know what I'm saying? And then it's like, okay, and then let's take a look at the baths. Let's zoom in there. And I zoom in on the pictures of the bathrooms. And they're like, okay, yeah, those pictures. So they have some features and amenities that we don't. How much are they asking? And she tells me, well, they're asking $550. Yeah. Do you know what DOM stands for? Yo, she gets the star for good students. She's like, days on market. I'm not giving out stars today, just so you know. I should.
You still have your take up presentation.
There you go. So then I'm like, yeah, how much, what does DOM stands for? And they're like, days on market. I'm like, great. And then what they're going to realize is, man, that's been on the market for like 60 days and it hasn't sold. Here's the important question. What do you think the marketplace is telling them about their price and product? What do we want to do? Verbally vomit. It's clearly too high because according to my calculations and my 75 on a test and the economics and shit that I don't know about, it's too high. That's dumb. But if you tell me that it's too high, what happens? Then it's true. It feels, and it's true. If you tell me. If I tell you, you're going to argue with me. Okay? So like, yeah, and here's where it's important. You ready for the language? I agree with you. The marketplace is telling us it's a little bit too high. Who's telling us?
The marketplace.
Who do we want to make tell us? Don't you know who I am? Ha ha. I'm the neighborhood expert. Ha ha. Guys, it's stupid. It's actually a low vibration. Leading, like trying to influence people with authority is the lowest form of influence. Period. Okay? This is much more powerful. It's the difference between power and force. Force is where I try to, power is where I get you to tell me. Okay? So then we go again, and we do this again with two other comps, two more actives. Then when we get to the closed. So here's the ones that have actually sold and closed. Okay? So let's look at this one. How many bedrooms does it have? 3. How many baths? 2. How much square footage? So for all intents and purposes, very similar, correct? Let's take a look again. And you know what? By this time, you know what she's going to do? She's going to take the iPad from me and be like, can I look? Sure. She's going to go, shh, shh. So would you say that the features and amenities of that home, are they similar to yours? Or perhaps maybe they're got a little bit more benefits than yours does? And then she's going to have to tell me, yeah, like their kitchen's nicer. So let's look here. Do you see right there? It tells us what it sold for. How much did it sell for? She's like, 510. Was something wrong with it? You know, I thought something similar. At the same time, it was just a normal transaction. I'm curious, is it beginning to make sense as to why the ones at 550 have been on the market for 60 days and hasn't sold? Uh-huh. You see? I'm painting a picture. I'm helping you to self-discover instead of using my ego to try to ram it down your, ram it in your face. Okay? And then we do it again with another sold. Okay? Then I ask the question. So, having reviewed this information together as a team, seen what's active on the market, not selling, seen what's sold and closed most recently, realistically, if you were a buyer, not a seller, because I know those hats are different, and you were going to buy this place all over again, where do you think you would feel comfortable making an offer that you believe would be reflective of fair market value? And then do my favorite thing, shut up. Because let me ask you a question. When is the decision-making happening? When you're speaking or when there's silence? Silence. But we are insecure, so we want to fill the air with words that don't mean anything. You see? I have to be comfortable enough just to be quiet. Because you know what's going to happen? If it's a pair, wife's going to look at the husband. Like silent communication happening. They know. And they'll be like, well, you know, like I see what you're saying. The marketplace is showing me like 510, but can't we start a little bit higher? That's something they say all the time, correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, what most people respond to that is defensive. That's dumb. Don't do that. Instead, you ready? Sure we can. I want to be clear. You're the boss here. My job is to help you to make an informed decision. It's never to talk you into doing anything. So what I'd like to do is to go over with you the options that we have so you can make the decision that you feel is best price-wise. And then whatever you decide, I'll support you 100%. Fair enough? Notice who's in control. They are. Have I made them wrong? No. Do we make people wrong with our facial expressions, tonality when somebody says something that's ridiculous? Yes. Yeah. Don't let your body like betray you. They're like 550, you're like. They're like, bro, do you need to go to the bathroom? Like, what's wrong with you? Right? So instead, yeah, of course. You're the boss. Eden. My job is to help you. It's never to talk you into doing anything. So let's go over the options that you have. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. So the first option is that we start higher. The logic behind that is I can always come. I can't go back. Notice, this is exactly how I present it because they fill in the blanks. Do you know why? Because they're thinking it. Make sense? Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that strategy per se. There are a few considerations though. The first consideration is that it takes longer. Okay? Now you were kind enough to share with me that in terms of this move to Texas, you had to be there in the next 120 days. So that means we need to be under contract in the next 60. Tell me this, what would happen on the outside chance if we were still sitting here 120 days from now and the home was not sold? What would that mean for you and your family?
Good.
Husband looks at the wife, she's like, that would be terrible. You're like, okay. So is it an option for you maybe to make the move and like leave the family here? No, it's not an option. Okay, so that's something to consider with regards to that strategy. The second issue is this issue of perceived value. So one of the first questions that buyers ask me when they come inside of a property is how many days this has been on the market. Why do you think they ask me that? Now notice, am I telling you why they're asking me that? No. Why do you think they ask me that? And they're like, well, I guess they want to see if something's wrong with it. Exactly. So as time goes by, do you think perceived value stays the same or do you think it goes down? Interesting. So with your goal and objective being to net the most and do it quickly and efficiently, does it seem like the strategy of starting high and coming down serves you best? Go ahead, begrudgingly.
I'm going through the same thing with the listing. I'm just listening.
Right, probably not. Okay, so that's something to consider. Now the second strategy is where we position it very competitively. By that, what I mean is very close to what's sold and closed most recently, or a hair below. The logic behind that strategy is even though interest rates have doubled, there's still demand in this price point, and we're still seeing multiple offer situations. Now I'm wondering, in a multiple offer situation, who usually wins? The person selling or the person buying? And why is that?
They have options.
Interesting. So the question is do you want to put yourself in a position where you can have multiple offers to choose from with the best terms and the best price, with the possibility of them bidding up the price? Is that a position you'd want to be in?
Yeah.
Interesting. So with that being said, and with those two options that are at your disposal, whatever you decide, I'll support you. Which one do you think would serve you and your family best with this move to Texas? And then, yes. See, we'll get you guys to learn this. I love this. You'll be on an appointment, you'll hear me in your head, shut up. And then they're going to look at each other and they're going to be like, well, honey, like we really got to move. It's like, all right, well, can't we start at like 5:15? And you're like, yeah, of course we can. Let me ask you this. If we see together as a team that the marketplace isn't responding, so in other words, we're getting showings and no offers or very few showings, if any at all, in like 2 to 3 week time frame, at that point, would you be prepared to revisit this and perhaps make an adjustment if need be? Shh. Why am I doing that up front?
So we need a price reduction.
And to manage the expectation. Because what happens is you are like, yeah, I think we can get, you don't want to make them mad. Yeah, we can start at 550. Then you go ask them for a price reduction and they freak the fuck out. They freak out because you haven't managed the expectation.
Yeah, they weren't aware.
They weren't aware. And anybody besides me just want to know everything up front?
Yeah, me.
Just, I don't want any surprises, bro. Just tell me what the deal is. Tell me how much you're going to charge me. Tell me like what it is. I don't want it to come up afterwards. Make sense? Then we get to, notice, has anything changed, by the way, with the NAR changes? Nothing. Now we've actually got to the part where something's actually changed. A smidge, just a smidge. Not that much. So, how many people have been on appointments? Oh, well, you actually had a story, Amy. You were on an appointment recently. Share it with us.
Last night we were on an appointment and we got to this part and obviously we asked, what do you know? About the changes or whatever. He's like,
Did they bring it up?
He did on the phone in our pre-call.
Interesting. What did he say?
He said, how much is really changing, or is it just a bunch of bullshit and it's just the way that more paperwork that you have to push?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, that's very interesting. We'll talk about that.
That's a wonderful example. Not verbally vomit and pontificate. It's a really good question. We've been getting it from sellers just like you. I'm making a note here. I'll be sure to review it with you when we get together. Is there anything else you want me to focus on?
And really, the paperwork spells it out so easily.
Correct.
That it makes it so easy to go.
With the industry leader EXP, by the way, the paperwork is very, very clear. Okay, because we have led the industry with the paperwork, and I'm going to show you an example of that in a minute. So he asked you about it. Then when you were on the presentation, I'm sure you went through this, and then it came to that. we got to this point where he said, hey, do I have to offer commission? Like, what's the deal? Okay.
So I was like, for sellers, this is what's changed. He's like, here's where I'm at. I didn't even have to say anything. He's like, this is my seventh house I've sold. I'm giving the buyer's agent compensation. I realize that's how I'm gonna get people into my house. So I'm just gonna give them I'm gonna give you, and you can tell the agents when they call.
Love it.
It's
Easy
like, we're
peasy.
like, okay, we do want to tell you that you have a third option where
And
you
he's-
don't have to
He's
disclose
like,
it,
I don't,
and blah, blah, blah. He's like, I know,
he's
but
like, I don't wanna
don't.
do that. I wanna know where I'm at. I wanna know what my nut's gonna be at the end.
I love it. So the thing that I want everybody,
Very experienced.
he's very experienced, so he's savvier than most.
Correct.
So what I'm aware of is that the analogy I like to give people with this is airplanes. Okay, so when you go on an airplane, everybody has choices, correct? You could sit in the back in Spirit and have a shitty experience and pay $50, right? But let me ask you a question. Have you ever been on an airplane and first class was not sold out? Sometimes. Is it ever empty? Why? They have cheaper shit in the back, don't they? Why is it not empty? Because some people value comfort, convenience, and speed. For me personally, sitting up front is fantastic because I can get out, I can get to my next meeting fast instead of having to wait. You see? And the same thing is true here, right? It's no different. It's just that the way that okay, let me ask you a question. In what industry is it possible for somebody brand new to make the same amount of money as a seasoned veteran? None. Can a doctor who's been doing it for 20 years, can a brand new doctor make the same amount of money as somebody who's doing it for 20 years? Can a brand new surgeon make the same amount of money as somebody who's doing it for 20 years? I need you to understand the way that our compensation was set up in the past, that is exactly what happened. A brand new spanking agent who doesn't know shit would make the same amount of money as me that has sold 2,000 homes in their career. Do you understand? So they had a point. And now we're just dealing with that. So the conversation has stayed the same except this detour, which we'll go over on the listing side. The way we document the conversation is what's changed. That's it. The documentation of the forms. Because what's essentially happened is there's no longer broker-to-broker compensation. It's seller to broker and buyer to broker. They did that intentionally and purposely because there'll be more negotiating. It's also market-driven. Right? So in a market, let me ask you a question. If you were selling, you had 16 offers on the table, you're going to counter back price terms and 100%, you fucking will. 100%. And that's just, they want that, truthfully. Now, I also sold real estate in 2008 and 9. Builders were offering out 6, 7, 8, 9, 10% commissions just to bring buyers. Because the demand was so low and the inventory was so high. So that's okay. We just got to function within that system. So we get to this point, they say, hey, I don't know if I have to, do I have to offer any commission? Like, what's the deal? Instead of verbally vomiting, ask what have you been hearing? That's a really good question. I know it's difficult to make sense of everything. What have you been hearing, David? Why? I want to gauge where they're at. What are they even thinking? And I'm like, well, is it true? Do I have to offer out something? It's like, well, the truth is you never had to offer out something. So what we'll do is first we'll go over how compensation is a tool that we use to market the property. Then we'll go over the 3 different options that you have at your disposal. And whatever you decide, I'll support you. Fair enough? So the compensation on the listing side is blank, whatever it is your compensation is. 2.5%, 3%, whatever it is you want to charge, right? All commissions are? Yes, they are. Okay? So now we're talking about if it makes sense to compensate a buyer's agent, and if so, by how much, and how to go about doing it, right? So the first thing we want to do is illustrate that it's a tool that we use to market the property. So let me explain to you what I mean. Let's imagine for a moment that you're a buyer in today's market. There are 10 properties available for sale within 5 miles of where we're sitting right now, which is where you want to be. 7 of them are offering to compensate your agent fully. The rest are offering nothing. Which properties would you instruct your agent to show you and sell you first? Now here's the important part. Why is that? Yeah, because then I don't have to come up with it. Okay, and don't you think most buyers would feel pretty similar to you? And they're going to be like, well, yeah, okay. So just by you saying that demonstrates that you recognize that the professional fee is in fact a tool that we use to market the property. Does that make sense? So we've established that. Now we can have a conversation about what your options are. Okay, the first option is we don't advertise, when they call us and reach out to us, because now agents are calling us. What we're seeing real time is they're calling us all the time on listings to ask about compensation. Look at all the heads nodding who have listings. So I have a couple options that I can tell them. So I want to review them with you so you can let me know which one you think would serve you best. The first option is I could say, hey, just include it in the offer and we'll work it out. Now, the challenge with that is it does create a little bit of friction. Can I explain to you what I mean? Well, let's imagine you're in that buyer position again, and there's two properties, and for all intents and purposes, you like them both the same. One, you're not sure if you're going to have to compensate your agent. The other one, you know it's taken care of. Which property do you think you'll be more excited about writing an offer on first? And why is that? Excellent. So just by you saying that, you recognize that it creates a little bit of friction. The second option is we can offer to partially compensate the agent. That would be in the form of a concession. We can put those, in the multiple listing service. And what we're seeing in this price point is somewhere like $10,000, $12,000. Now, what I need you to understand, that also creates a little bit of friction as well. Because if we go back to that other example, let's say there's two properties, one offered a partial, one full, you like them both the same, which one do you think you write an offer on first? Okay. The third option is we can do what we've done for the last 50 to 100 years, is we can just offer out compensation. You give me permission to tell agents when they call exactly what we're going to offer out. That will reduce the friction the most, which will lead to you getting the most amount of money in the least amount of time. So either one of those options are okay. My question is based on what you're looking to accomplish and why and the time frame you'd like to make this happen in, which one do you think would serve you best? And then,
Shut up.
Yes, shut up. Because the truth is you know what I was doing as a dominant listing agent before? I was negotiating my commission and, interesting, we're not doing that anymore. Do you see? Now we're having a conversation about compensation here, and then here's what the pros and cons of offering compensation out, right? The benefits, and whatever you decide to do, I'll support you 100%, and then really being unattached to the outcome. Whatever they decide is perfectly fine. Now, if they decide to offer out, to not advertise what they're offering out or just include it in the offer, and it hasn't sold in 3 weeks, what do you think we're going to talk about? We're going to it's going to be part of the price adjustment conversation or the alteration conversation of the listing. So I'm going to address that up front. So if they say to me, no, under no circumstances, I just want them to make an offer, I don't want to negotiate against myself. Okay. So here's my question to you is if we see together as a team that within 3 weeks to a month, we're not getting showings and we're not getting offers, at that point, would you be prepared to revisit that? And perhaps decide to offer something out and then be quiet because I want to manage that expectation up because we're going to talk about it. Does that make sense? Cool. So hey, is that earth-shatteringly different? No. Guys, this is not like this gigantic earthquake of difference. Yes?
Would you say it's better not to expose what you're offering as a seller and just tell them to submit an offer?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I can understand both. I understand people's kind of logic saying I don't want to negotiate against myself. Right? Just make me an offer and we'll figure it out. If somebody decides to do that, I would manage the expectation and say, hey, what we're seeing, just so you know, is when we've done that with other properties, agents are asking for 2 to 3% commissions of the agreed upon purchase and sales price. Is that something you would be open to? Shut up. Because I want to know what we're talking about. So if somebody's like, yeah, make me an offer, and I ask them that question, yeah, I'll give them $5,000. We have a problem. Particularly if it's not in a market where there's going to get 16 offers on it. Because in that environment, truthfully, does the seller have to offer anything? Nope. I told you I had a one-on-one client in Pennsylvania, 16 offers on the table. You know what offer got accepted? The buyer's agent lowered their professional fee to 1.5%. Guys, that's the open market. Do you understand? So when I would get as a dominant listing agent, when I got 10 offers on a property, Carla, who's in the back, my beautiful wife, she would, as the operations manager, list all 10 on an Excel spreadsheet. She'd highlight the best 3 based on price, terms, and conditions. You know what it's going to be now? Price, terms, conditions, and 100%. And you think as a listing agent, I'm not going to be like, hey, just so you know, there's multiple offers on the table. If you want to augment your offer, the seller has given me permission to let you do so with the next 24 hours. If you want to change price, terms, conditions, and commission, feel free to do so. I'll then present, and whichever one works best for the seller is what we'll go with. You think those buyer's agents are going to fucking 100%. You see what I'm saying? It's just a reality. It's market dynamics. At the same time, when markets become more challenging, you have more leverage. You can ask for more, as it should be.
That was bonus before.
Yeah, we just happen to be in an environment now with low inventory and still high demand and relatively cheap money in comparison historically, where there's still demand in the market, you know? So how do I document this conversation? Here is our company, EXP, has led the way with forms. Everybody else was sitting around sucking their thumbs. They created these forms. It created a little bit of a hubbub. It's in alignment with the rules and the changes, and it protects agents and protects liability, because I need you guys to understand, do you know who's going to be responsible for enforcing these rules? MLS systems. Do you know that it is a revenue stream for them? And as a revenue stream, you think they're going to be paying attention like a hawk? Can most agents afford a $2,500 fine? No. The answer is no. They can't. So you need to make sure you're documenting this shit right. This is a free Google Doc that our company offers. These are the paperwork that we're using and that I'm coaching all of our clients to use and all the agents in our organization. So here's the thing to be clear on. Me and Esteban had this conversation. Exclusive right to sell listing agreement. The main changes is, look, broker will earn compensation when the sale of the property is completed, regardless of who has found the buyer. Listing broker compensation shall be paid by who? That is the main change, guys. It's not broker to broker. It is seller to broker. You understand? So all these agents who are trying to pontificate and think otherwise, I had somebody DM me. He's like, broker to broker compensation. Like, dude, I'm like, okay, do it and get fined. That's what's going to happen. Okay? So that's the main change here. Notice here, unrepresented buyers. I just interviewed, I did a live stream with Leo Perea. He's the CEO of EXP. He sold 4,000 homes in his career. Okay? He sold technology to MLS systems. He's a fucking rock star. Okay? What he said to me, there'll be a new classification of buyer. Have we had for sale by owner sellers forever? You know what we're going to have now? For sale by owner buyers. 100%. Now, what he said, what was interesting, is that statistically, for sale by owner sellers, like 20% of them sell on average. Of the 80% that don't, they list with an agent. The 20% that do sell, this is data. The amount of litigation in that 20% is disproportionate when an agent's involved. Okay? So there'll be a new category, which is for sale by owner buyer. So a buyer calls Esteban on his listing. He's like, dude, I don't need representation. I know what I'm doing. Okay? Just want you to write the offer. That's what this is here, unrepresented buyers. That's why it is here. How many of us on listing presentation, seller says, hey, what happens if you get both sides? All the time. I need to have that conversation up front. If somebody calls me and doesn't want to be represented, here's what we're going to charge. Up front. Now, if you're only writing a contract, does it make sense to charge a large amount like you would on the listing side? Probably not. You can charge whatever you want, but like you're just writing up the contract. Because what does unrepresented actually mean? It means I don't help you at all, bro. That's what that means. That means when you call me and you're like, yeah, I'm ready to do my inspection. I'm like, hey, bro, just so you know, you're outside of your inspection period.
What? Why didn't you tell me?
And they're like, what do you mean? How come you didn't tell me? It's like, well, if you remember when you called, you were very clear. You didn't want me to represent you. So, you know, that's the deal. And he's like, well, I'll just ask for my deposit back. Great. Well, just so you know, you can't use the inspection as a way to get out. So you'll probably lose that. And then they're like, well, I'll just get an attorney involved. Great, do that. Yeah, but they want to charge me $1,000 to look at the contract. Okay. Like that's legit going to happen, like 100%. But this is, look, we're leading the way. Our documentation is reflective of the what? Rules. And it's protecting agents, liability. Because agents can't afford to pay the fines. Do you understand? The average agent in the United States makes $70,000 a year. They can't afford to pay the fine. Here's what also has changed. In here, seller concessions. Buyer may request concessions from the seller, right? Again, I'm not an attorney. I'm just reading you these documents. The final amount of selling concession must be determined in writing, whether in the purchase sales agreement or applicable document. All sellers' concessions are negotiable. Okay? Now, let's say we have that conversation with the seller and they're like Amy's seller did, and they're like, yo, I want to offer compensation. That's what I want to do. I need a separate form to document that. Remember, the conversation hasn't changed. How we document it has changed because the mechanism with which the money's flowing has changed. Do you understand? So, for Esteban's seller who has decided to offer out compensation, the undersigned seller agrees to compensate a real estate brokerage company for its procurement of the buyer of any transaction between seller and buyer. Compensation shall be in U.S. currency, blah, 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 blah. This agreement shall act as escrow instructions, da, 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 da. So where's the compensation going from? Seller, not broker. Do you see? I'm just documenting it differently. That's all. And look here, it's either a percentage or an amount. And they sign. Guys, this is the 1% that's actually changed. That's it. The conversation hasn't changed. The way we're presenting hasn't changed. Notice we took a little detour to talk about, the benefits and pros and cons of compensation. The real thing that's changed is how we document it. That's it. Does this make sense to everybody?
Yes.
I'm sorry, does this make sense to everybody?
Yes.
All right, stay with me. So, yeah. All right. So, is everybody clear on the fact that, well, let me ask you this. What has actually changed? What mechanism has changed? This is like this is where I would give out stars. What mechanism has changed?
The way we transfer money.
The way we transfer money. Right? So for Evelyn's title company, the way she transfers money legally has changed. She cannot transfer money from broker to broker. She's transferring money from sellers and buyers to brokers. That's the main thing that's changed. Has 99% of listing presentation changed? No. Do I have to take a little detour to explain compensation? 5 minutes. I take I-95 instead of the turnpike. Make sense? And then it's critical that you guys use these forms. Okay? This will give you script ideas. What we did is I did a live with my mentor, Neil Weichel. He does $5 million a year in sales. And he was walking through when he talks to buyers, when he talks to sellers, how he's having those conversations. So we're giving you those scripts for free. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share with you a model. Oh, now, but before I get into that, can everybody agree that based on your time spent here, you feel to have conversations with sellers? Yes or no? Yes. Are you clear? Yeah, I know. You always have questions. So he does. I love it. He does. So is everybody clear on how to document the conversation?
Yes.
Good. Which is the intention. Before we get into the next one, yes.
Well, let's say I'm a potential seller, call me up on the phone, and I say, yeah, I'd love to